Your job is not your life's plot. Separating identity from employment without losing ambition. Written and narrated by MSC Boost. You stopped being able to answer the question, "Who are you?" without talking about what you do for a living. This happened so gradually that you probably can't pinpoint when it started. But somewhere along the way, your job description became the organizing principle for your entire sense of self. Your work didn't just occupy your time. It occupied you. The mechanism is more specific than most people realize. You achieved something, landed a competitive position, exceeded a target, earned recognition from someone whose opinion mattered. That achievement created a brief but powerful sensation of being real, being substantial, being someone who exists in a way that counts. Your nervous system registered this as safety, as proof that you're not invisible or irrelevant. You learned that performing well at work doesn't just advance your career. It temporarily resolves the question of whether you matter. Chapter 1. When work became the whole story. Here's where things get complicated. High achievers don't just enjoy success. They become dependent on it for a sense of coherence. Each time you prove yourself professionally, you're not just building a resume. You're building what feels like evidence that you exist as a meaningful person. The problem isn't that you care about doing good work. The problem is that good work became the method by which you construct a self at all. Your identity didn't expand to include your career accomplishments. Your identity contracted until your career accomplishments were the main substance of who you allowed yourself to be. This process isn't a personal failing. It's a logical response to how modern professional environments function. Workplaces measure everything. They quantify your output, rank your performance, evaluate your contributions against clear metrics. They tell you exactly where you stand and whether you're succeeding or falling behind. The rest of life offers no such clarity. Your relationships don't come with performance reviews. Your private thoughts produce no metrics. Your body's needs generate no quarterly reports. Your curiosities lead nowhere you can measure. So you poured more of yourself into the domain that gives clear feedback, that tells you definitively whether you're doing well or poorly, that provides consistent evidence you're someone who matters. The merger accelerated each time work rewarded your investment. You stayed late to finish a project and received praise. You checked email over the weekend and caught a problem before it escalated. You skipped a personal commitment to attend a work event and made a connection that advanced your position. Every time work paid off, you learned that prioritizing your job isn't just a strategic career move. You learned that prioritizing your job is how you become the version of yourself that deserves to take up space. The payoff wasn't just professional advancement. The payoff was the temporary relief of not having to wonder whether you're enough. Professional success operates as a drug. That's not metaphorical. Your brain responds to achievement with the same neurochemical cascade that creates other dependencies. You get a hit of validation when you perform well, and then you need another hit to maintain the feeling that you're real and substantial. The tolerance builds. The same level of performance that used to satisfy you stops being enough. You need bigger achievements, longer hours, more evidence that you're exceptional rather than ordinary. What started as healthy ambition became the mechanism by which you temporarily escape the discomfort of existing without proof. Most advice about work-life balance misses this entirely. Books tell you to set boundaries, leave work at the office, make time for what matters. That advice assumes your problem is poor time management or weak boundaries. Your problem isn't time management. Your problem is that you've outsourced your sense of being a real person to your job performance. When work is how you know you exist, taking a night off doesn't feel like healthy balance. It feels like vanishing, like becoming less substantial, like betraying the only version of yourself that seems to count. The merger happens across several predictable stages. At first, your work is just what you do. You care about performing well, but you exist independently of your job title. You have thoughts and interests and facets of yourself that live outside your professional role. Your identity is larger than your employment. Then you start succeeding. Your competence becomes visible. People recognize your abilities. You get promoted, assigned more responsibility, entrusted with more challenging projects. Your job becomes more interesting, more demanding, more central to how you spend your mental energy. During this phase, your identity quietly shifts. You still have aspects of yourself outside work, but they start to feel secondary. Your real life, the life that counts, the life where important things happen, becomes synonymous with your professional life. You start introducing yourself by talking about your job. You describe yourself using your job title. You evaluate your year based on your career progress. You measure your worth by your workplace status. The other parts of you don't disappear. They just become hobbies, distractions, the things you do when you're not being your real self at work. The final stage is when you can't separate yourself from your professional performance anymore. Your mood depends on how work is going. Your self-esteem rises and falls with your latest achievement or setback. You feel guilty when you're not working because you're not being the version of yourself that matters. You feel anxious when you have unstructured time because you're not producing anything that proves you're valuable. You've become unable to access your own existence except through the lens of your job performance. This isn't unique to you. It's endemic among people who are good at what they do. The better you are at your work, the more susceptible you are to this merger. Your competence made you valuable. Then it made you promotable. Then it made you indispensable. Then it made you invisible to yourself unless you were performing. Each achievement trained you further into believing that your substance comes from your output, that your identity is justified by your productivity, that who you are depends on what you accomplish. Professional environments don't just permit this merger. They reward it. The people who advance fastest are the people who care most intensely about their work. Organizations promote individuals who make their jobs central to their lives. Managers favor employees who respond to messages at night, who work on weekends, who prioritize the company over everything else. The system selects for people who have merged their identity with their professional role, then rewards them for that merger, which reinforces the behavior and makes it harder to extract yourself later. You learned that being available means being valuable. You learned that caring intensely about your work means caring intensely about being a good person. You learned that professional success equals existential worth. These lessons weren't taught explicitly. They were demonstrated through promotions, praise, recognition, and the contrast between how visible you felt when you were achieving versus how invisible you felt when you weren't. Your nervous system figured out the pattern. Work hard, feel real. Stop working, feel like you're dissolving. The difference between having professional goals and making your job your entire identity is the difference between building something and needing something to prove you exist. Professional goals are things you want to accomplish because they interest you, challenge you, or move you toward specific outcomes you value. They're external to your sense of self. You can fail at them without collapsing. You can succeed at them without feeling like that's the only evidence you're a worthwhile person. They're projects, not proof. Making your job your identity means you need professional success to feel like a real person. Your work isn't something you do. It's evidence that you're someone who deserves to take up space. You can't fail without it confirming your worst fears about yourself. You can't succeed without immediately needing more success to maintain the temporary high of feeling substantial. Your job becomes the load-bearing wall of your entire sense of self. Everything else, your body, your relationships, your private thoughts, your unmonetized interests, becomes decoration around the only part that feels structurally important. The structure is unstable. When your identity depends on your professional performance, your peace depends on factors you don't control. Your worth fluctuates with your boss's mood, your company's performance, your industry's stability, and your body's ability to maintain the pace indefinitely. You're building yourself on ground that shifts constantly. You feel that instability as chronic low-level anxiety, the perpetual sense that you're about to be revealed as insufficient, that your value could evaporate if you stop performing for even a short time. This is why work-life balance feels impossible for high achievers. You're not trying to balance two domains of equal importance. You're trying to maintain a self that's been built almost entirely out of professional performance, while also expecting that self to exist and feel real during the hours when you're not working. You're trying to have an identity that's separate from your job when your identity is your job. The math doesn't work. You can't subtract the foundation and expect the structure to stand. What makes this particularly difficult to address is that the merger worked for a while. It got you where you are. Your intense focus on professional performance likely produced real career success. Your willingness to prioritize work over everything else probably advanced your position. Your tendency to find your worth and achievement probably made you good at what you do. The problem isn't that the strategy failed. The problem is that it succeeded so well that you can't imagine any other way to be a person who matters. You're operating with an identity structure that made sense at a certain point, but has outlived its usefulness. When you were building your career, when you were proving your competence, when you were establishing yourself professionally, it was effective to pour yourself fully into work. That single-minded focus produced results. It got you hired, promoted, recognized. The strategy worked. What changed is that you never updated the strategy after it achieved its purpose. You kept using the same approach long past the point where it served you, until it became the entire foundation of how you experience yourself. Nothing about this means you're broken or weak. You responded rationally to environments that provide clear rewards for professional performance and ambiguous rewards for everything else. You developed a strategy that worked within those constraints. The strategy just stopped serving you somewhere along the way, and you kept using it because it's the only method you developed for feeling like you exist as a person who matters. You're not failing at life. You're succeeding at an outdated version of success, and your nervous system is trying to tell you that something needs to change. Recognizing this pattern is different from fixing it. You can see clearly that you've merged your identity with your job and still feel completely unable to separate them. The recognition doesn't automatically change how your nervous system responds to achievement and non-achievement. It doesn't immediately make you comfortable existing without professional validation. It doesn't instantly create other sources of identity that feel as substantial as your work performance. But the recognition does something important. It locates the actual problem, which isn't that you work too much or care too intensely about your career. The actual problem is that you've built yourself out of a single ingredient, and you need more ingredients to construct something stable enough to hold both ambition and existence beyond performance. Chapter 2. Mapping what lives outside your job title. Writing things down changes them from vague intentions into tangible material you can work with. This chapter asks you to create a written inventory of who you are when professional performance isn't the measuring stick. The goal isn't self-discovery in the abstract sense. The goal is to generate a document that contains specific information about yourself that exists completely independent of your career accomplishments. You'll refer back to this document repeatedly as you work through the rest of this book, and when work inevitably tries to consume your entire identity again. Get a notebook or open a new document on your device. You'll need something dedicated to this work, not scattered notes in various places. The act of writing creates something your brain can recognize and return to. Thoughts that stay in your head remain fluid and easily dismissed. Thoughts written on a page become real enough to examine. You're building evidence that you exist beyond your job title, and evidence requires documentation. Sensory preferences that have nothing to do with productivity. Your body knows things about you that your resume has no record of. Start with temperature. Write down whether you run hot or cold, whether you prefer warm spaces or cool ones, whether you seek out sun or shade when given the choice. This isn't about comfort optimization for better work performance. This is about noticing that you have preferences that exist purely because of how your specific body moves through the world. Move to texture. Write what fabrics feel right against your skin, what surfaces you want to touch, what materials make you slightly uncomfortable. Notice whether you prefer soft or structured, smooth or rough, heavy or light. Your hands know the difference between materials, even when your conscious mind doesn't register the distinction. Document what your hands reach for when you're not thinking about reaching for anything. Sound comes next. Write about silence versus noise. What kinds of sounds soothe you versus grate on you? Whether you prefer voices or instrumental music, or the absence of both. Your ears have been collecting data about your preferences for decades. You probably know whether you want background sound or complete quiet, whether you're drawn to rhythmic patterns or ambient wash, whether human voices feel comforting or intrusive. Write what you actually prefer, not what you think you should prefer or what helps you focus at work. Taste operates outside any professional metric. Write what flavors you genuinely want, not what's healthy or efficient or appropriate for your schedule. Document whether you prefer sweet or savory, bland or intense, familiar or novel. Write about texture in food, about temperature, about combinations that work for your specific palate. Your taste buds don't care about your career trajectory. They just know what they like. That knowledge is part of who you are independent of what you do for a living. Light matters to your nervous system in ways that have nothing to do with productivity. Write whether you prefer bright spaces or dim ones, natural light or artificial, warm tones or cool ones. Write about what time of day you feel most like yourself, not most productive or most focused, but most aligned with how you actually want to exist in the world. Your circadian rhythms don't optimize for professional performance. They just run on their own schedule, and that schedule is information about you. Smell gets overlooked, but your olfactory system is constantly processing preferences. Write what scents you seek out, what smells make you feel grounded, what odors you avoid. This includes everything from coffee to rain to cut grass to book pages to specific seasons. Your nose knows things about what makes you feel present in your body that your analytical mind might dismiss as trivial. Write them down anyway. Trivial preferences are still preferences. They're still part of how you exist as a specific person. Unmonetized curiosities that serve no career purpose. Your mind wanders to certain subjects when it's not being directed toward professional tasks. Write what you think about when you're not thinking about work. These are the topics that catch your attention for no reason related to advancement or achievement. They might be completely unrelated to your field. They might seem pointless or random. Write them down precisely because they serve no professional function. Some people wonder about how things are made. Others think about historical events. Some minds drift toward understanding systems. Others gravitate toward aesthetics. Some people mentally solve spatial puzzles. Others replay conversations or construct narratives. Write where your mind goes when it's not being productive. This wandering is data about your actual interests, the subjects your consciousness moves toward when it's not being supervised by professional ambition. Write about the subjects you read about when you're not reading for work. This includes everything from articles you click on to books you pick up to videos you watch when you're not trying to learn something useful. Your attention goes somewhere when it's not being managed. That somewhere is information about what genuinely interests you as opposed to what interests your career. Document the questions you ask that have no practical application. These are the why and how questions that pop up about subjects that won't advance your position or improve your skills. Your mind generates questions constantly. Most of them get dismissed as irrelevant because they don't serve your professional goals. But they're not irrelevant to understanding who you are when achievement isn't the criterion. Write about what you notice that other people don't seem to notice. This could be visual details, patterns in behavior, inconsistencies in systems, subtle shifts in mood or atmosphere. Your particular brain highlights certain kinds of information while filtering out other kinds. What your brain chooses to highlight is part of your specific way of processing reality. That's identity information that exists completely separate from your job performance. Your physical self beyond performance metrics. Your body exists whether or not it's optimized for productivity. Write how your body actually feels right now, not as a problem to fix, but as information to document. Where do you hold tension? Which parts of you feel grounded? Which parts feel disconnected or numb? Your body is constantly generating sensations that have nothing to do with whether you're succeeding professionally. Those sensations are part of your experience of being alive. Write about how your body wants to move when you're not exercising for health or stress relief. This means the movement that happens without a goal attached. Some bodies want to stretch. Others want to walk. Some want to dance or sway. Others want to be still. Your body has preferences about movement that aren't about fitness or optimization. Those preferences are part of who you are. Document your energy patterns across a typical day. Not your productive hours, but when you actually feel alive versus depleted. Some people wake up energized. Others don't feel present until afternoon. Some bodies have steady energy. Others spike and crash. Your particular energy pattern is information about your specific physiology, not a performance metric to improve. Write about your body's relationship to sleep. How much sleep does your body actually need to feel restored? What happens to you when you don't get enough? What does your body do when it has permission to sleep as long as it wants? Your body has requirements that exist independent of your work schedule. Those requirements are part of understanding yourself as a physical being who exists outside professional demands. Hunger and fullness operate on their own schedule. Write about when your body actually wants food, how much food it wants, what happens when you ignore those signals. Your body knows how to regulate itself. Professional demands often override those signals, but the signals are still there. They're information about you that has nothing to do with your career. Private thoughts that never need to produce anything. Your mind generates content that serves no purpose beyond existing. Write about the thoughts you have that you don't share with anyone, not because they're shameful, but because they're just thoughts that live privately. These could be observations, reactions, memories, fantasies, or passing commentary on what's happening around you. Your internal monologue is part of who you are even though it produces nothing measurable. Document the memories that surface repeatedly. Not the ones you tell as stories, but the ones that play in your mind for reasons you can't quite explain. These memories mean something to you, even if you're not sure what. They're part of your internal landscape. They shape how you experience the present moment. They're yours in a way that has nothing to do with your professional identity. Write about what you value that you've never articulated to anyone. These are the things that matter to you privately, that shape your choices in subtle ways, that influence what you pay attention to and what you dismiss. Your values aren't just the ones you perform publicly or the ones that serve your career. You have private values that exist whether or not anyone knows about them. Writing them down makes them visible to you. Your mind constructs fantasies that serve no practical purpose. Write about what you daydream about when your mind drifts. These fantasies might be about accomplishment, but they might also be about completely different ways of living, different versions of yourself, scenarios that will never happen. Your fantasy life is part of your internal experience. It tells you something about what your mind wants to explore, even if you never act on those explorations. Document the internal reactions you have to situations that you don't express outwardly. Your face might show professional composure, while your internal experience is completely different. You have thoughts and feelings about what's happening around you that you keep private. Those private reactions are part of who you are. They exist whether or not they're visible to others or useful for your career. The version of you that existed before career defined you. Go back to before your current professional identity formed. Write about who you were when you were younger, before you started building your career. What did you care about? What did you spend time on? What version of yourself did you express before professional success became the primary concern? This isn't about nostalgia. This is about locating parts of yourself that existed before work became the defining feature. Some aspects of that earlier self still exist beneath your professional identity. They got buried under years of achievement-focused living, but they didn't disappear completely. Write about what still resonates from that earlier version of you. What do you recognize when you think about who you were before career consumed your sense of self? Write about the activities you used to do before they needed to serve a purpose. These might have been creative pursuits, physical activities, social connections, or solitary interests. They mattered to you before you learned to evaluate everything by whether it advanced your position or improved your skills. Some of those activities might still matter to you now if you gave them permission to exist without justification. Document what you cared about before you learned to care primarily about achievement. This could have been relationships, ideas, causes, experiences, or simple pleasures. That earlier version of you had interests that weren't filtered through the lens of professional advancement. Those interests are still part of your psychological makeup, even if they've been dormant for years. Creating your written record. Everything you've written in response to these prompts becomes your reference document. This isn't a journal entry you write once and never look at again. This is material you'll return to repeatedly, particularly when work starts colonizing your identity again. Your written record is evidence that you exist beyond your job performance. That evidence matters when your nervous system is telling you that professional achievement is the only proof of your worth. Keep this document accessible. You'll add to it as you notice more things about yourself that exist independent of your career. You'll revise it as you get clearer about what actually belongs to you versus what you adopted, because it served your professional image. This document grows and changes as you do the work of separating your identity from your employment. Read through what you've written. Your preferences, curiosities, physical experiences, and private thoughts are part of who you are right now, today, regardless of your job title or professional status. They exist whether you acknowledge them or ignore them. They persist whether you succeed at work or fail at work. They're the material of your actual self, not the self you constructed out of achievement and validation. This written record gives you something concrete to work with as you build an identity that's larger than your professional role. Chapter 3. Why your best efforts made the problem worse. Your competence created the conditions for your identity to merge with your work. This sounds backwards because we're trained to think that being good at something is always positive, that skill development and professional excellence lead to better outcomes across the board. But your ability to perform at a high level is precisely what made it possible for work to consume your sense of self. People who are mediocre at their jobs rarely develop this problem. They don't receive enough positive reinforcement to make their professional identity the load-bearing structure of their entire existence. Every time you succeeded at work, your brain registered that success as evidence of your value. The promotion, the recognition, the increased responsibility, these weren't just career milestones. They were moments when you felt real, substantial, like someone who matters in a way that could be measured and confirmed. Your nervous system learned to associate professional achievement with existential validation. The better you performed, the more validation you received, and the more your brain wired itself to seek that validation as proof of your worth. This wouldn't have been a problem if the validation had been occasional. But you're good at what you do, which means the validation came regularly. Each success taught your brain that this is how you generate proof of your value. Work hard, produce results, receive recognition, feel real for a while. The pattern repeated often enough that it became your primary method of constructing a self. You didn't decide to make this your strategy. Your brain just noticed what worked and optimized for it. Professional environments accelerated this process because they're designed to reward exactly the behavior that leads to identity merger. Organizations want employees who care intensely about their work, who prioritize the job over other aspects of life, who derive their sense of purpose from their professional contributions. The people who advance fastest are the people who demonstrate this level of commitment. You advanced because you showed up with the kind of dedication that suggests your identity is already intertwined with your performance. The system selected you for promotion specifically because you exhibited the traits that make someone vulnerable to complete identity merger. Your promotions weren't just recognition of your competence. They were rewards for making your job central to who you are. Each time you moved up, You received confirmation that investing more of yourself in your work was the right strategy. The hidden message wasn't, "You did good work on this project." The hidden message was, "Becoming the kind of person whose identity depends on professional success is how you rise." You learned that lesson thoroughly because the evidence kept proving it true. The cost of being good at your job is that excellence makes it harder to maintain any self that exists outside of work. When you perform at a high level, people come to depend on that performance. Your manager assigns you more challenging projects. Your colleagues expect you to deliver exceptional results. Your own standards rise to match your capabilities. The better you get, the more is expected, and the more you feel obligated to meet those expectations because your sense of being a competent person depends on continuing to perform at that level. This creates a specific kind of pressure that has nothing to do with external demands. Yes, your workplace expects things from you, but the more intense pressure comes from your own need to prove you're still the person who deserves the position you hold. You can't just maintain your current level of performance. You need to keep improving, keep achieving, keep demonstrating that you're not stagnating or becoming complacent. Your identity depends on an upward trajectory. Staying the same feels like failing, because it means you're no longer generating new evidence of your value. Success taught you that more investment produces more validation. You worked late and got promoted. You took on additional responsibilities and received recognition. You prioritized work over personal commitments and advanced faster than your peers who maintained boundaries. Every single time, the strategy paid off professionally. Your brain drew the obvious conclusion. This is what works. This is how you become someone who matters. The fact that the strategy was slowly consuming your entire sense of self didn't register as a cost, because the benefits were so clear and immediate. The problem with successful strategies is that you keep using them long past the point where they serve you. What worked when you were establishing yourself professionally becomes the only method you know for generating a sense of worth. You don't update the approach because it's still producing results. You're still getting promoted, still receiving recognition, still advancing. The strategy isn't failing from a career perspective. It's just hollowing you out from an identity perspective. And that's harder to measure than professional success. Each achievement made the next achievement necessary. Your first major success felt validating. Your second success felt like confirmation. Your third success started to feel like the baseline you needed to maintain. The more you achieved, the more your nervous system required achievement to feel okay. What used to be a peak experience became your new normal, which meant you needed bigger peaks to get the same validation hit. The tolerance built exactly the way tolerance builds with any substance that produces temporary relief from discomfort. Your brain wasn't trying to trap you. It was trying to help you feel safe and substantial. Professional achievement genuinely did make you feel those things, so your brain quite reasonably pursued more achievement. The problem is that your brain optimized for the short-term feeling of validation, without accounting for the long-term cost of building your entire identity out of performance. Your brain saw that work produced results and doubled down on work as the solution to every uncomfortable feeling, every moment of uncertainty, every question about whether you matter. The distinction between legitimate professional development and compulsive performance is subtle but crucial. Legitimate professional development happens because you're genuinely interested in expanding your capabilities, because you want to take on challenges that engage you, because you're curious about what you can accomplish in your field. The work itself is intrinsically motivating. You'd probably pursue it even if it didn't come with validation or recognition, because the activity itself matters to you. Compulsive performance happens because you need the validation that comes from achievement. The work is instrumental. It's not the work itself you're after. You're after the temporary relief of feeling valuable that the work produces. You might tell yourself you're passionate about your job, but the truth is you're dependent on what your job does for your sense of self. If the validation stopped, if the recognition disappeared, if the promotion ceased, the work would lose most of its appeal because the work was never really the point. The point was always the proof. You can test this distinction by noticing what happens inside you when you think about doing something work-related that will produce no visible results, no recognition, no advancement. If you feel immediate resistance, if your brain starts generating reasons why that activity isn't worth your time, if you feel anxious about wasting hours on something that doesn't move you forward, you're probably dealing with compulsive performance. The work only matters if it produces evidence of your value. The work itself has become secondary to what the work proves about you. Legitimate professional development can coexist with other facets of your identity. You can care deeply about your work and also have other parts of yourself that feel equally substantial. Compulsive performance crowds out everything else because you need all your energy directed toward the activity that generates validation. When work is how you prove you're valuable, you can't afford to invest yourself in domains that don't provide that proof. Everything that isn't work starts to feel like a distraction from the real business of constructing a self. The hidden cost shows up in how you respond to periods when you're not actively achieving. If taking a weekend off makes you feel like you're disappearing, if vacation creates anxiety about falling behind, if sick days feel like moral failures, if any time not spent working feels like time wasted, you're experiencing the cost of having built your identity entirely out of performance. You can't rest without feeling like you're losing substance because your substance comes from your output. No output means no substance, which means rest feels dangerous rather than restorative. Your colleagues who maintained boundaries didn't suffer this cost. The people who treated work as something they do rather than something they are can stop working without feeling like they're ceasing to exist. They might be less professionally successful than you. They probably didn't advance as quickly. But they kept parts of themselves intact that exist independent of their jobs, which means they can access their own existence, even when they're not performing. They paid a career cost to avoid the identity cost you're now dealing with. You didn't make a conscious choice to prioritize career advancement over identity preservation. You just followed the incentives that were clearest and most immediate. Professional success was measurable, achievable, and consistently rewarding. Identity preservation was vague, hard to quantify, and produced no obvious short-term payoff. Your brain chose the strategy that generated reliable results. The fact that those results came at the expense of your ability to exist comfortably outside of work didn't become apparent until much later, after the pattern was deeply established. What makes this particularly hard to address is that the strategy genuinely did serve you for a significant period. You're not wrong that working hard and caring intensely about your performance led to good outcomes. Your career is probably stronger because you invested yourself so completely. The recognition you received was real. The advancement you achieved was earned. The problem isn't that the strategy was wrong. The problem is that you never developed any other strategy for feeling like a person who matters. So when the career strategy stopped being sufficient, you had nothing else to fall back on. High achievers often interpret this realization as evidence they need to work even harder, achieve even more, reach even higher. If professional success used to make you feel substantial, but doesn't anymore, maybe you just haven't achieved enough yet. Maybe the next promotion will finally provide lasting validation. Maybe the next major accomplishment will resolve the question of your worth permanently. Your brain offers this solution because it's the only solution it knows. Work harder, perform better, achieve more. The fact that this is the exact thinking that created the problem doesn't register, because the thinking is so deeply ingrained. Wanting more isn't the problem. Wanting more is fine. Ambition is fine. Professional goals are fine. The problem is that wanting more got channeled entirely into professional achievement, instead of expanding who you are across multiple dimensions. Your ambition didn't make you broader. It made you narrower. Each success pruned away parts of yourself that weren't directly related to professional performance, until you were left with a single dimension that's now responsible for holding your entire sense of self. You could have wanted more in other domains. You could have been ambitious about relationships, creative pursuits, physical challenges, intellectual interests that have nothing to do with your career. But those domains didn't provide the clear, measurable validation that work provided. So your ambition concentrated itself in the area where it produced the most obvious results. This made sense from a short-term perspective. It's devastating from a long-term identity perspective. Your competence made you valuable to your organization. Your competence made you promotable. Your competence made you successful by every conventional metric. Your competence also made you vulnerable to merging your identity completely with your professional role, because competent people receive enough positive reinforcement to make work feel like the most reliable source of existential validation. The better you are at your job, the more dangerous it is to make your job the foundation of your identity, because you'll receive enough success to keep reinforcing the pattern until you can't separate yourself from your performance anymore. Looking at this pattern doesn't mean your achievements don't count or your success is somehow fake. Your professional accomplishments are real. Your competence is real. The problem is what happened to your identity while you were busy achieving. You built something impressive professionally while simultaneously building something unstable psychologically. Both things are true. Your career success and your identity fragility aren't contradictory. They're connected. The same process that produced your professional achievements also produced your current situation, where you can't feel real unless you're performing. Chapter 4. Locating your center of gravity outside performance. Your core self is the part of you that remains when external validation disappears. This isn't a mystical concept. Your core self is simply what you care about, what you value, and what matters to you when nobody's watching and nothing counts toward any measurable outcome. The difficulty is that years of professional performance have obscured what's actually core versus what you adopted, because it served your career. You've been performing values and preferences for so long that distinguishing performance from genuine preference requires deliberate excavation. Take out your notebook again. This chapter involves more writing, but different writing than you did in Chapter 2. That earlier work documented observable things about your self-preferences, curiosities, physical sensations. This work goes deeper into territory that's harder to see and easier to fake. You'll be asking yourself questions that have no correct answers, which makes them uncomfortable for people who've built their identity on being able to perform correctly. That discomfort is useful. It means you're working in the right area. Start with this question and write your response. What do you care about when nobody knows you care about it? This question separates genuine caring from performative caring. Performative caring happens when your values are visible to others and contribute to how you're perceived. You care about things publicly because caring about those things makes you seem like a certain kind of person. That's not inherently wrong, but it's different from caring about something in the privacy of your own experience when it produces no social or professional benefit. Write without editing yourself. Your first impulse might be to write what sounds good, what makes you seem like a thoughtful person, what aligns with values you think you should hold. Push past that impulse. What do you actually care about in moments when you're alone and nobody will ever know? This could be something as simple as whether a particular bird comes back to your window. It could be the satisfaction of organizing something just for yourself. It could be private grief about something most people have forgotten. Whatever surfaces is information about your actual values versus your performed values. The next question goes further. What would you still care about if caring about it produced no results whatsoever? This question isolates intrinsic caring from instrumental caring. Instrumental caring is when you care about something because caring leads to outcomes you want. You care about your health because it helps you perform better. You care about relationships because they provide support. You care about skills because they advance your career. Those things might matter to you genuinely, but they might also matter primarily because they're useful. Intrinsic caring persists, even when the thing produces nothing, improves nothing, advances nothing. Write what comes up without judging whether it makes sense. Some people care about beauty that serves no function. Others care about understanding things that have no practical application. Some care about fairness, even when it doesn't affect them. Others care about precision in domains that don't matter professionally. Your brain will want to dismiss these cares as trivial or pointless. Write them down anyway. Trivial cares are still cares. They tell you what your actual values are when utility isn't the measure. Here's a harder question that reveals more. What matters to you that you've never told anyone matters? This question surfaces the values you keep private, not because they're shameful, but because they exist in a register that doesn't need to be shared or performed. These private values shape your internal experience and your quiet choices, but they never become part of your public identity. They're yours in a way that professional values never are because they've never been filtered through the lens of how they make you appear to others. Write whatever surfaces, even if it seems disconnected from the person you present to the world. Some people privately value silence in ways they never articulate. Others value sensory experiences that seem too small to mention. Some value internal consistency between their thoughts and actions in ways that nobody else would notice. These private values are often more central to your actual self than the public values you perform. But they're invisible in your professional identity because they don't serve any career function. Now write your response to this. What would you defend, even if defending it cost you something professionally? This question separates values that matter enough to accept consequences from values that only matter when they're convenient. You might publicly claim to value many things, but which ones would you actually protect if protecting them created professional problems? Which values are non-negotiable, even when negotiating them away would advance your position? Your answers might surprise you. You might discover you defend things you didn't realize mattered so much. You might discover that some values you thought were central are actually conditional, that you'd abandon them fairly easily if your career required it. Both discoveries are useful. They show you what's actually load-bearing in your value system versus what's decorative. Here's a question that strips away performance entirely. What do you think about when you're not thinking about anything specific? This question accesses the default content of your consciousness when it's not being directed. Your mind has a baseline state it returns to when you're not focusing on tasks or problems or goals. That baseline state contains information about what occupies your psychological space naturally, without effort or intention. Write about where your mind goes during empty moments. Some minds return to past conversations, replaying them or imagining different outcomes. Other minds drift toward visual imagery or spatial puzzles. Some minds generate narratives. Others notice sensory details. Some minds worry. Others wander through scenarios that will never happen. Your particular default mode tells you something about your actual internal life versus the internal life you've constructed for professional purposes. The next question requires honesty that's difficult for high achievers. What would you do if you knew you'd never be recognized for doing it? This question separates achievement-oriented activity from activity that matters independent of recognition. You do many things because they lead to visibility, promotion, or acknowledgement. Those activities might be worthwhile, but they're not the same as activities you'd pursue, even if they guaranteed anonymity and produced no reputational benefit. Write what you'd actually do, not what you think you should do or what sounds impressive. Some people would keep doing exactly what they're doing now, which suggests their work genuinely matters to them beyond the recognition it produces. Others would shift entirely toward different activities, which suggests their current work is primarily instrumental. Neither answer is better. Both are information about what actually drives you versus what drives you, because it produces validation. Here's a question that exposes adopted values. What do you claim to care about that you'd secretly be relieved to stop caring about? This question identifies values you perform because they're expected, because they make you seem like a good person, because they align with who you're supposed to be. You carry these values like obligations, and if you're honest, you'd prefer to set them down. They're not genuinely yours. They're borrowed from environments that rewarded expressing these particular values. Write about the values that feel like burdens. Some people perform caring about issues that don't actually resonate with them. Others claim to value things they don't really value because those values are professionally advantageous. Some hold themselves to standards they don't genuinely believe in. These performed values take energy to maintain because they're not organically part of who you are. Identifying them doesn't mean you'll immediately abandon them, but knowing their performances rather than genuine values is useful information. The next question cuts to identity structure. Who would you be if your job disappeared tomorrow? This isn't asking about your financial situation or your daily schedule. It's asking about your sense of self. If your professional role evaporated, what would remain? What would you still know about yourself? What would still be true about who you are? This question reveals how much of your identity is actually independent of your work versus constructed entirely from your work. Write your answer honestly. Some people have a clear sense of who they'd be without their job. They have enough identity infrastructure outside work that losing their professional role would be painful, but wouldn't erase them. Other people discover they'd have almost no sense of self remaining. Their identity is so thoroughly merged with their work that removing work leaves almost nothing. If you find yourself in that second category, you're not alone. That's exactly why you're reading this book. Here's a question about values versus ideals. What do your actual choices reveal about what you value, separate from what you say you value? This question uses behavior as data rather than self-report. You might claim to value health, but your choices reveal you value professional achievement more. You might say relationships matter, but your calendar shows work dominates your time allocation. Your stated values and your revealed values often don't match. The revealed values are more accurate indicators of what actually matters to you right now. Write about what your behavior actually shows. Look at how you spend time when you have choices. Examine what you prioritize when resources are limited. Notice what you protect versus what you sacrifice. Your choices are more honest than your statements because choices involve trade-offs that reveal what you're willing to give up and what you're not. You might not like what your choices reveal, but they're more reliable data than your aspirational claims about what you value. The next question targets the difference between should and want. What would you do if obligation disappeared entirely? Obligation drives much of your behavior. You do things because you should, because you're expected to, because failing to do them would create consequences. But underneath obligation, there's sometimes wanting, and there's sometimes nothing. Temporarily removing obligation from the equation helps you see what you genuinely choose versus what you're performing out of duty. Write what you'd do if nobody expected anything from you and every choice was genuinely free. Some people discover they'd keep doing versions of what they're already doing, which suggests alignment between obligation and desire. Others discover they'd do almost nothing they're currently doing, which suggests their life is built primarily on obligation rather than genuine preference. That's painful information, but it's accurate information about the gap between who you are and who you've constructed yourself to be for external reasons. Here's a question about values that can't be performed. What do you care about that nobody can see? Some values are inherently visible. You can demonstrate caring about achievement, competence, helping others, social justice, or professional excellence. Others happen entirely internally. You can't demonstrate internal consistency. You can't prove private integrity. You can't show commitment to truth-telling in your internal monologue. These invisible values are often more central to your actual self because they exist purely for you, not for the performance of being a certain kind of person. Write about the internal values nobody can verify. Some people care deeply about being honest with themselves, even when self-honesty serves no external purpose. Others value maintaining certain internal standards regardless of whether anyone knows. Some care about the quality of their private thoughts. These values shape your internal experience, but remain completely invisible in your professional identity. They're often more reliable indicators of your core self than the values everyone can see. The next question addresses what you'd save. If you could only keep 3 things about yourself, what would they be? This question forces prioritization. You can't keep everything. You have to choose what's actually central versus what's just present. Your professional achievements might make the list. They might not. Your relationships might be there. Your curiosities might surface. Your body might matter more than you realized. What you choose reveals the hierarchy of what constitutes your identity. Write your 3 things without overthinking. Your first impulse is probably more honest than your carefully considered answer. What jumps to mind when you think about the core of who you are? Those things matter more than the identity elements you'd think to include after deliberation. This isn't about getting the right answer. This is about seeing what you reflexively reach for when you're asked to identify what's essential about yourself. Here's a question that separates development from compulsion. What would you pursue if you knew you'd never master it? This question identifies genuine curiosity versus achievement-oriented learning. High achievers often pursue skills because they want to master them, get good at them, become proficient enough to earn recognition. But some pursuits matter even if mastery is impossible. You'd engage with them perpetually, never getting better, just because the engagement itself has value. Write what you'd pursue knowing you'd remain mediocre forever. Some people would keep making music. Others would keep learning languages. Some would keep trying to understand complex systems. The activities that survive this test reveal what you value for its own sake, rather than for what mastery would prove about you. These activities are often closer to your core self, because they're not filtered through the need to be good at everything you touch. The next question exposes the limits of your current identity. What parts of yourself have you been pretending don't exist? High achievers often prune away aspects of themselves that don't fit their professional image. You might have parts of yourself that seem frivolous, unproductive, inconsistent with who you're supposed to be. You haven't eliminated these parts. You've just stopped acknowledging them, stopped giving them space, stopped letting them influence how you present yourself. Write about what you've been hiding from yourself and others. Some people have suppressed their need for play. Others have hidden anxiety or uncertainty that doesn't match their confident professional persona. Some have buried interests that seem too childish or impractical for someone at their career level. These hidden parts don't disappear just because you ignore them. They create internal pressure that manifests as dissatisfaction or exhaustion, or the feeling that you're not quite real, even when you're successfully performing your professional role. Here's a question about presence. When do you feel most like yourself? This question identifies situations where your actual self and your performed self align, where you're not managing your image or proving your worth or maintaining your professional persona. These moments are data about what conditions allow your core self to be present without performance. Write about when this happens for you. Some people feel most themselves when they're alone. Others need specific kinds of company. Some feel real during physical activity. Others feel present when they're creating something. Some feel authentic when they're learning. The specific conditions matter less than noticing that you have conditions where your sense of self strengthens without requiring achievement or validation. These conditions point toward aspects of your identity that exist independent of professional performance. The final question builds your hierarchy. If you had to describe yourself without mentioning your job, what would you say? This question forces you to construct identity from non-professional material. You can't lead with your job title. You can't use your career as the organizing principle. You have to find other language to convey who you are. This is difficult if work has colonized most of your identity, but the difficulty itself is valuable information. Write your description. You might start with physical descriptors or personality traits. You might mention preferences or curiosities or relationships or experiences. What matters is whether you can construct a meaningful self-description without leaning on your professional identity. If your description feels thin or unconvincing, that tells you how much identity work remains. If you can describe yourself substantively without mentioning work, you have more identity infrastructure outside your job than you might have realized. Everything you've written in response to these questions maps the territory of your actual self. Some answers will feel solid and true. Others will feel uncertain or provisional, That mix is what you're working with. Your identity isn't equally developed across all dimensions. Parts of your core self are clear and accessible. Other parts are obscured by years of professional performance and need excavation. This written material gives you something to build from rather than just vague intentions to be more than your job. Read through everything you've written. Notice where work shows up in your answers and where it doesn't. Notice what matters to you that serves no professional purpose. Notice the values that persist, even when they're invisible or inconvenient. Notice what you care about that nobody can measure. This is your raw material for constructing an identity structure where work is present, but not dominant, where professional achievement is part of who you are, but not the entire load-bearing structure. You're not trying to eliminate work from your identity. You're trying to build enough other structural elements that work can be what it is, something you do that matters to you, without being the foundation that holds everything else up. Chapter 5. Sitting with the void that appears when you stop proving. Something specific happens when you begin separating your identity from your professional performance. You feel like you're disappearing. Not metaphorically disappearing, but experiencing an actual sensation that you're becoming less real, less solid, less present. Where there used to be the reliable hum of achievement providing constant proof of your existence, there's now just quiet. That quiet feels dangerous. Your nervous system interprets it as a threat, because for years, the absence of achievement meant the absence of validation, which meant the absence of proof that you matter. This void isn't a sign you're doing the identity work wrong. The void is evidence the work is actually happening. You've been using professional performance as a way to fill the space where your sense of self should naturally exist. When you start pulling back from using work that way, the space becomes visible. What you're experiencing isn't emptiness that shouldn't be there. You're experiencing the gap between your performed identity and your actual self. And that gap has always existed. You just kept it filled with achievement so you wouldn't have to feel it. Your brain will offer urgent messages about this void. It will tell you that you're losing yourself, that you need to get back to work immediately, that stopping proves you're lazy or uncommitted or wasting your potential. These messages sound convincing because they've kept you functioning for years. Your brain learned that achievement makes the void go away temporarily. So when the void appears, your brain's solution is always more achievement. The fact that more achievement is exactly what created the void in the first place doesn't factor into your brain's calculations, because your brain is optimizing for immediate relief, not long-term identity stability. The discomfort you're feeling has a specific quality that's different from other kinds of discomfort. This isn't the productive discomfort of learning something difficult or the physical discomfort of exertion. This is the groundlessness of existing without proof. You've spent years believing that your worth requires constant demonstration, that you need evidence to justify taking up space, that without achievement you're not real enough to matter. When you stop providing that evidence, even temporarily, you experience the fear that maybe you actually don't exist in any substantial way. That fear is old. It predates your career. You brought that fear into your professional life, and your professional success became the method you used to manage it. Work provided such reliable relief from the fear of not mattering that you never developed any other method. Now you're feeling the fear directly instead of medicating it with achievement. And your nervous system is treating this like an emergency because from its perspective, you've just removed the only thing that was keeping you safe. Sitting with this void means allowing the sensation of groundlessness without immediately rushing to fill it with more performance. This is harder than it sounds because the urge to prove yourself will feel urgent and necessary. Your hands will want to reach for work. Your mind will generate compelling reasons why you need to achieve something right now. Your body will feel restless and anxious. All of these responses are your nervous system trying to get you to go back to the strategy that worked before, even though that strategy is exactly what you're trying to move away from. The practice starts with noticing when the void appears. You'll feel it most acutely during unstructured time, when you're not actively working or achieving anything measurable. You might feel it on weekends, during vacation, in the evening after work ends, or any time you're supposed to be resting, but instead feel like you're evaporating. The sensation might show up as anxiety, as restlessness, as the urgent feeling that you should be doing something productive. It might feel like boredom that's somehow threatening rather than just neutral. When you notice the sensation, your immediate response will be to make it stop. That response is completely understandable and also exactly what you need to interrupt. Instead of reaching for achievement to fill the void, just acknowledge that the void is present. You don't have to like it. You don't have to be comfortable with it. You just need to tolerate it being there without immediately doing something to make it disappear. Practical tolerance looks like this. You're sitting on your couch on a Saturday afternoon. You have no work obligations. You're not doing anything productive. The void sensation starts rising. Your chest gets tight. Your mind starts generating tasks you should be doing, emails you should be checking, projects you should be advancing. Instead of obeying those impulses, you stay sitting. You notice your chest is tight. You notice your mind is offering solutions. You notice the urgency feels real and compelling. You stay sitting anyway. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to stay still when you genuinely want to move. It means not letting the void sensation dictate your choices automatically. The difference is between moving because you want to move and moving because you can't tolerate being still with yourself. If you want to get up and do something that genuinely interests you, that's fine. If you're getting up purely to escape the discomfort of not proving yourself, that's the pattern you're trying to interrupt. Your body will produce physical sensations that try to get you to move back toward achievement. Your heart rate might increase. Your breathing might get shallow. You might feel tension in your shoulders or neck. Your stomach might feel unsettled. These aren't random physical symptoms. They're your nervous system's way of creating enough discomfort that you'll return to the familiar strategy of medicating groundlessness with performance. When these physical sensations appear, you can work with them directly. Notice where the tension lies in your body. You don't need to make it go away. Just locate it. Your shoulders are tight. Your jaw is clenched. Your stomach is churning. Breathe into wherever the sensation is strongest. Not deep, calming breaths designed to fix the sensation, just normal breaths that acknowledge the sensation exists. Your body is having a response. That response doesn't mean you're in actual danger, even though it feels urgent. The void will tell you that you're wasting time, that every moment not spent achieving something is a moment wasted, that you're falling behind while other people are advancing. These thoughts are data about how thoroughly you've learned to equate existence with productivity. They're not accurate assessments of reality. They're the voice of the identity structure you built out of achievement trying to preserve itself by convincing you that stopping is dangerous. You can let these thoughts be present without obeying them. Write them down if that helps create distance. I'm having the thought that I'm wasting time. I'm having the thought that I should be working. I'm having the thought that I'm falling behind. The thoughts keep appearing because that's what thoughts do. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to act on them. You just have to let them exist while you practice being present without producing anything. The void will also show up as a sense that you're becoming invisible. When you're not achieving, you might feel like you're fading, like people will forget about you, like you're losing your place in the world. This feeling reveals how much you've tied your visibility to your output. You believe that people see you because of what you produce, so when you stop producing even temporarily, you feel like you're disappearing from perception. This isn't true, but it feels true because your identity has been built on the idea that you're only visible when you're performing. Tolerating the invisibility sensation means sitting with the fear that maybe nobody cares about you when you're not producing something. That fear is painful because it contains a truth and a lie mixed together. The truth is that some of your professional relationships are transactional. Some people value you primarily for what you can do for them. That's just how professional networks function. The lie is that this proves your worth is conditional on your performance. Your worth as a person exists independent of what you produce. The fact that some relationships are transactional doesn't mean you're only valuable when you're being useful. The void might feel like boredom, but it's not the boredom of having nothing to do. It's the specific discomfort of existing without the structure that achievement provided. You have things you could do. You could read, walk, cook, rest, think. But none of those activities prove anything about your worth, so they feel pointless. The void is showing you that you've lost access to intrinsic motivation, to doing things because they interest you rather than because they demonstrate your value. Recovering intrinsic motivation means doing things that produce no achievement, while noticing that you're still real, even though you're not proving anything. Pick an activity that has zero professional value and zero measurability. Read something purely for pleasure with no goal of finishing it or remembering it. Walk somewhere with no destination or fitness tracking. Cook something without documenting it. Sit outside without optimizing the experience. Do something that exists solely for its own sake, and notice what happens in your body and mind while you're doing it. You'll probably feel the urge to optimize whatever you're doing, to make it count towards something, to extract value from it. That urge is your achievement orientation trying to colonize even your rest. Notice the urge and do the activity anyway without letting it become productive. The point isn't to do the activity well. The point is to exist while doing something that proves nothing about your worth. You're building tolerance for being present without the validation that achievement provides. The void will intensify during transitions. When you finish a project, when you complete a goal, when you reach a milestone, you'll feel the void more strongly because your achievement just ended and your nervous system hasn't gotten its next hit of validation yet. Your brain will want to immediately start the next achievement cycle to avoid feeling the gap. Instead of rushing into the next thing, pause. Let yourself feel the completion without immediately reaching for more. This pause feels wrong because you've trained yourself to move seamlessly from achievement to achievement without ever stopping to exist in between. The gap between achievements is where the void lives most intensely. That gap is also where your actual self lives, the self that exists independent of what you're currently accomplishing. You can't access that self if you never let yourself exist in the gap. Weekends and vacations will be difficult during this phase of the work. Time that's supposed to be restorative will feel threatening because it's time when you're not proving yourself. You might find yourself working on weekends, even though you don't have to, checking email on vacation, even though nobody's expecting responses, creating productivity projects during time that's meant for rest. These behaviors are your nervous system trying to fill the void before it becomes too uncomfortable. Practice taking time off without filling it with achievement. This doesn't mean you have to be completely inactive. It means not using your time off to prove something about yourself. You can do activities, take trips, see people, engage with hobbies. Just don't turn them into performance opportunities. Don't post about them constantly. Don't track them. Don't measure them. Do them because you want to do them, and let them exist without needing them to demonstrate anything about who you are. The void will convince you that feeling this uncomfortable means something is wrong, that you've made a mistake, that you should go back to making work your identity, because at least that felt stable. This is your nervous system's resistance to change. What felt stable was actually you constantly running from the void by filling it with achievement. That constant running was exhausting, even though it felt necessary. The stability you remember wasn't actually stable. It was just familiar. Discomfort isn't evidence of error. Discomfort is evidence that you're doing something your nervous system isn't used to. You're learning to exist without constant proof of your worth. Your nervous system is objecting because this is unfamiliar, and therefore registers as unsafe. The objection doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something different, and your brain needs time to learn that this different way of being isn't actually dangerous. The void will feel largest when you're alone. Other people's presence can temporarily mask the void because you're performing a version of yourself for them, which gives you structure. When you're completely alone with no one to perform for and nothing to achieve, the void becomes unavoidable. This is why many high achievers struggle with solitude. Being alone means being with themselves without the buffer of performance, and that direct contact with themselves feels intolerable because there's no proof mechanism operating. Practice being alone without filling the time with productivity. Sit with yourself without your phone, without work, without anything that proves you're valuable. Just exist for a period of time. Start with short periods if longer feels impossible. 10 minutes of sitting alone without proving anything. Then 15. Then 20. You're building capacity to tolerate your own existence without the constant validation of achievement. The void will try to convince you that you're losing your edge, that other people are surging ahead while you're sitting here doing nothing, that you'll be left behind permanently if you don't get back to intense performance immediately. This scarcity thinking is part of what created the identity merger in the first place. You believed that stopping for any reason would result in catastrophic loss of position. That belief kept you performing long past the point where it served you. Test whether the scarcity thinking is accurate. When you take a weekend off completely, do you actually fall behind in any measurable way? When you don't check email for an evening, does anything catastrophic happen? When you let yourself rest without justifying the rest with productivity gains, do you actually lose your competence? The evidence will probably show that your scarcity thinking is wildly overblown. But you won't know that until you test it. Your brain will keep generating urgent messages about falling behind until you gather actual data that contradicts those messages. The void sensation will change as you practice sitting with it. What feels intolerable at first becomes slightly more tolerable with exposure. This doesn't mean it becomes pleasant. It means it becomes survivable. You learn that you can feel like you're disappearing without actually disappearing, that you can exist without proof and still be real, that your worth doesn't evaporate during the hours when you're not achieving anything. Some days the void will feel manageable. Other days it will feel overwhelming. This isn't linear progress where each day is easier than the last. You're working against years of conditioning that taught you that achievement equals existence. That conditioning doesn't dissolve smoothly. It releases in waves. You'll have periods where sitting with the void feels possible, followed by periods where your nervous system panics and insists you need to return to constant performance immediately. During the difficult periods, you don't need to be perfect at sitting with the void. You just need to notice that you're struggling and choose not to completely abandon the practice. If you find yourself working intensely because the void felt too threatening, that's information about your current capacity. You can acknowledge what happened without judging yourself, and then try again when you have more resources. This work isn't about forcing yourself to tolerate more than you can handle. It's about gradually expanding what you can handle without needing to immediately fill the space with achievement. The void you're sitting with isn't actually empty. It just feels empty because you're used to filling it with performance. What lives in that space is your actual self, the part of you that exists independent of what you accomplish. Right now, that self feels insubstantial because it hasn't been developed. You've been too busy achieving to build the internal structure that would make that self feel solid. The discomfort you're experiencing is the gap between the underdeveloped self that actually exists and the performed self you constructed out of achievement. Sitting with the void is how you start giving your actual self space to become substantial on its own terms, rather than through borrowed validation from professional success. Chapter 6. Constructing Identity Architecture that Holds More Than Work. You've mapped what exists outside your job title, examined how your competence created the problem, located your core self beneath years of performance, and learned to sit with a void that appears when you stop proving. Now you need to build something new with all that material. This chapter is about constructing an identity structure that's genuinely spacious enough to contain your professional ambition without being dominated by it. You're not erasing your career from your identity. You're building enough other structural elements that your career becomes what it actually is, something important that you do, instead of what it's been the entire foundation, holding up your sense of self. Pull out everything you've written in the previous chapters. You'll need that material in front of you, because you're going to use it to construct written statements that define you across multiple dimensions simultaneously. These statements aren't aspirational. They're not who you hope to become. They're descriptions of who you actually are right now, built from the real preferences, values, physical sensations, and private thoughts you've already documented. The difference between aspirational identity and actual identity is the difference between a wish and a structure. Wishes don't hold weight. Structures do. Start with a statement that includes work, but isn't defined by work. Write a sentence that describes your professional life as part of a larger whole, rather than the organizing principle of your existence. This is difficult because you're used to leading with your job when you describe yourself. Your professional role has been the most important information about you, the thing that explains who you are to yourself and others. You need to relocate work to a different position in the sentence structure, making it subordinate to something else rather than the main clause. Your statement might read something like, "I'm someone who values precision in how I think and communicate, which shows up in my professional work, and also in how I construct arguments in private conversations, and how I organize my physical space." Notice that work appears in the sentence, but it's just where one value happens to manifest. The value exists independent of the work. The work is evidence of the value, not the source of it. This is the structural shift you're making across your entire identity. Write statements about your sensory preferences that exist completely outside professional context. These might sound like, "My body runs cold and seeks warmth, which means I'm drawn to sun, hot drinks, and heavy blankets regardless of what I'm doing or where I am." That's identity information that has nothing to do with your career. It's true whether you're working or not working, succeeding or not succeeding. Your body's relationship to temperature is part of who you are, independent of any achievement or performance. Create statements about your curiosities that make those curiosities as legitimate as your professional expertise. I think constantly about how systems fail, not just in my field, but in biological systems, social systems, mechanical systems. This curiosity is part of how my mind works, not something I do for professional development. You're taking an interest that might have seemed peripheral and giving it equal status with your career-related skills. Your curiosity about system failure is part of your identity, whether or not it ever serves your job. Write statements that acknowledge your physical self as part of your core identity. My body needs 8 hours of sleep to function well, and when I don't get it, I'm operating with reduced capacity in all areas. Sleep isn't something I fit around work. Work happens within the constraints of what my body requires. This statement relocates your body from the category of things that support my professional performance to fundamental aspects of myself that don't negotiate. Your body isn't a tool for your career. Your body is part of the structure of who you are. Create statements about your values that exist whether or not anyone sees them. I care about internal consistency between what I think privately and what I do publicly, even when that consistency produces no external benefit. This value shapes my choices in ways that are completely invisible to others. You're claiming a private value as part of your identity structure. That value doesn't serve your career, but it's still load-bearing in terms of who you actually are. Write statements that include your physical sensations and energy patterns as identity information. My energy peaks in late morning and crashes in mid-afternoon. This pattern is part of my physiology and affects what I can do, and when I can do it, across all domains of my life. You're not treating your energy pattern as a productivity metric to optimize. You're treating it as information about how your specific body functions, and that information is part of your identity regardless of whether it aligns with standard work schedules. Create statements about your private thoughts and internal reactions. I have constant internal commentary on what's happening around me that I rarely share. This internal voice is part of how I experience reality, and it exists whether or not it ever becomes visible to anyone else. Your private thoughts are part of your identity structure, even though they're invisible. They shape your internal experience, and your internal experience is part of what constitutes you as a person. Write statements that claim your unmonetized interests as legitimate parts of yourself. I read about historical events not because they're useful for anything, but because my mind is drawn to understanding how situations evolved. This interest is as much a part of me as my professional skills. You're giving your curiosity about history the same structural importance as your career competencies. Both are part of who you are. Neither is more central than the other. Create statements that describe your sensory preferences without justifying them. I need periods of complete silence to feel like myself. This isn't about productivity or focus. It's about my nervous system requiring absence of sound to stay regulated. Your need for silence exists independent of what it does for your work performance. It's part of how your specific nervous system functions, and that makes it identity information rather than just a lifestyle preference. Write statements that include your body's movement preferences as part of your core self. My body wants to walk, not as exercise, but as a way of thinking and existing. Walking is part of how I process experience, and that's been true long before it had any relationship to fitness or stress management. Your movement preferences are part of your identity structure. They're not strategies for supporting your career. They're how your particular body wants to move through the world. Create statements about values you defend, even if defending them created professional costs. I won't lie in ways that contradict what I actually think, even when lying would be strategically advantageous. This value is more central to who I am than my career advancement. You're building statements that put values above professional success when those values genuinely matter more to you. This reorders your identity hierarchy so work isn't automatically the highest priority. Write statements that acknowledge your emotional patterns as part of your structure. I need solitude after intense social interaction regardless of whether that interaction was pleasant or stressful. This isn't about being introverted or extroverted. It's about how my nervous system processes social input. Your need for solitude after socializing is identity information. It's part of your psychological structure, and that structure exists independent of your professional life. Create statements that include your aesthetic preferences as legitimate identity elements. I'm drawn to spaces with warm light and soft textures. This preference affects what environments I seek out and how I construct my private spaces. These aesthetic needs are part of who I am. Your aesthetic preferences aren't just lifestyle choices. They're information about what your nervous system responds to, what makes you feel present in your body, what conditions help you exist comfortably in space. Write statements about what you care about that no one can measure. I care about being honest with myself about what I'm actually feeling and thinking, even when that honesty serves no external purpose. This internal integrity is part of my psychological structure. You're claiming values that exist purely internally as part of your identity. These values don't produce anything visible, but they're still load-bearing in terms of who you are. Create statements that describe your default mental state as identity information. My mind drifts toward constructing narratives about situations and people. This narrative construction happens constantly whether I'm working or not. It's part of how my consciousness functions. Your mind's particular way of processing experience is part of your identity structure. That processing pattern exists regardless of whether you're engaged in professional activities. Write statements that include your relationship to food as part of your core self. I prefer savory over sweet, intense flavors over bland ones. These taste preferences are part of my sensory experience of being alive. They're not about health or optimization. They're about what my particular palate responds to. Your food preferences are identity information. They're part of how your specific body interacts with the world, and that interaction pattern is part of who you are. Create statements about your energy requirements that exist independent of productivity. I need transition time between activities or I feel fragmented and overwhelmed. This need isn't about efficiency. It's about how my nervous system processes change. Your need for transitions is part of your psychological structure. That need exists whether or not it aligns with what your work schedule demands. Write statements that claim your memories as part of your identity. Certain memories surface repeatedly for reasons I can't fully explain. These recurring memories shape how I interpret present experiences, and they're part of my internal landscape regardless of whether they serve any current purpose. Your memories are part of your identity structure. They affect how you experience the present moment, which makes them relevant to who you are even when they don't serve any professional function. Now look at all the statements you've written. Each statement describes something true about you that exists whether or not you're succeeding professionally. Some statements include work, but work is never the dominant element. Work is present as where certain values or interests manifest, but those values and interests could manifest in other domains just as legitimately. Other statements have nothing to do with work at all. They're about your body, your preferences, your values, your mind's particular way of operating. Read through your statements and notice which ones feel solid versus which ones feel uncertain or aspirational. The solid statements are describing aspects of yourself that already exist. They might not get much attention or space in your current life, but they're real. The uncertain statements are either describing things that are genuinely less developed or describing things you think you should claim as part of yourself, but don't actually experience as true yet. Keep only the solid statements for now. You're building identity structure out of real material, not out of who you hope to become. The aspirational elements can come later, but right now you need a foundation built from what's actually present. Your identity structure needs to be able to hold weight, and only real elements can do that. Wishes don't provide structural support. Take your solid statements and organize them by domain. Some statements will be about your body. Others will be about your values. Some will describe your sensory preferences. Others will capture your mental patterns. Some will include work. You're creating a written document that shows you as someone who exists across multiple dimensions, with work being part of that multidimensional existence, but not the defining dimension. Your organized document becomes your identity map. This map shows your structure. Work appears on the map, but so do many other things. Your body appears. Your values appear. Your preferences appear. Your curiosities appear. Your private thoughts appear. Your aesthetic needs appear. Your energy patterns appear. Each element on the map is part of your identity structure, and each element has equal structural importance, even though they don't all have equal visibility or social value. Test your identity map against specific scenarios. When you think about taking a full weekend off from work, does your map contain enough other elements that you still feel like a real person during those 2 days? When you consider an evening without any professional activity, can you locate yourself using the other dimensions on your map? When you think about being sick and unable to work for a week, does your identity structure hold, or does it collapse because work was the only load-bearing element? If your map doesn't hold up under these tests, you need more structural elements. Go back to your earlier writing and find aspects of yourself that you documented, but haven't yet claimed as part of your identity structure. Keep building your map until it contains enough dimensions that temporarily removing work doesn't cause the entire structure to collapse. Your map will need maintenance. Work will constantly try to colonize your identity again, because that pattern is deeply established. You'll need to actively reinforce the non-work dimensions, or they'll atrophy. Set a regular time to review your identity map. Monthly works well. During that review, notice whether work has expanded to dominate your identity again, or whether the other dimensions are holding their space. When you notice work colonizing your identity again, you'll see specific signs. You'll start describing yourself primarily through your job. You'll feel less real during time away from work. Your mood will depend almost entirely on your professional performance. You'll struggle to answer questions about yourself without mentioning your career. You'll feel anxious during unstructured time. Your body's needs will start feeling like obstacles to your work, rather than legitimate parts of your identity. These signs tell you that your identity structure is contracting back toward work dominance. This doesn't mean you failed. It means you need to actively reinforce the other dimensions. Go back to your map. Spend time engaging with the non-work elements. Make choices that prioritize your body's needs or your sensory preferences or your unmonetized curiosities. You're reminding yourself through your choices that these dimensions are real and structural, not just decorative elements that only matter when work allows space for them. Your identity structure will feel awkward at first. You're used to work being central, so having work be just part of a larger structure feels strange. That strangeness isn't a sign the structure is wrong. It's a sign the structure is different from what your nervous system is used to. Your nervous system will need time to learn that this more spacious structure is stable enough to rely on, that you can exist as a real person, even when work isn't the organizing principle. Some people will resist your expanded identity structure. Your colleagues might notice you're less available, less committed, less willing to make work your entire life. Your professional network might sense that you're no longer basing your worth entirely on your output. That resistance is information about how thoroughly professional environments depend on people merging their identities with their work. You're not wrong for building a more spacious structure. The environments are designed to reward contraction, and you're choosing expansion instead. Your expanded structure might affect your career trajectory. When work is part of your identity, but not the dominant part, you might not advance as quickly as people who've made work their entire self. You might not be willing to sacrifice your body's needs or your private values or your sensory preferences for professional advancement. That's a trade-off you're making consciously rather than by default. You're choosing identity stability over maximum career velocity. That's legitimate. That's what it means to have an identity structure, where work is present, but not dominant. The structure you're building isn't static. Your identity will continue developing and changing. But now you have architecture that can hold development across multiple dimensions, instead of concentrating all development in the professional domain. When you grow, you can grow in terms of your physical awareness, your value clarity, your sensory attunement, your curiosity exploration, your private integrity, not just your career advancement. Growth becomes multidimensional rather than unidimensional. Your identity map gives you something to reference when you're making decisions, something to return to when work starts consuming too much space, something to remind you that you exist as a person across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Work matters. Work is part of who you are. Work just isn't the only part or the most important part. Your map shows you that complexity and helps you maintain it, even when professional environments pressure you to collapse back into work-defined identity. Chapter 7. Operating from your expanded self in daily decisions. Your identity structure now exists on paper. You have a map that shows you as someone who exists across multiple dimensions, with work being part of that existence, but not the defining element. The challenge is making that structure operational in your actual life. Written statements don't automatically change how you make decisions. Your default programming still runs on the old operating system, where professional performance dominated everything. This chapter is about translating your expanded identity into the decisions you make every day. From small choices about how you spend Tuesday evening to large choices about whether to take a promotion. Decisions reveal identity. When you have to choose between options, what you choose shows what matters most to you right now, regardless of what you claim matters most. Your expanded identity structure becomes real when it starts influencing your choices. This doesn't mean you'll suddenly stop prioritizing work. It means you'll start checking decisions against your complete identity, rather than just your professional advancement. Some decisions will still favor work. Others will favor your body, your values, your energy needs, your sensory preferences, or your unmonetized curiosities. The shift is that work stops being the automatic winner and becomes just one factor among many. Start with low-stakes decisions to practice operating from your expanded self. These are choices that don't have major career implications, but reveal your identity priorities. Your manager sends a message at 7 in the evening asking for input on something. Your old programming automatically responds immediately because responsiveness demonstrates commitment, which reinforces your professional identity. Your expanded self has other considerations. Your body needs transition time after work. Your evening includes activities that matter to non-work dimensions of your identity. Your value of not letting work colonize all hours competes with your value of being competent and reliable. The decision-making process looks different when you check against your expanded identity. You ask yourself what responding immediately serves. It serves your professional reputation and your need to feel valuable through responsiveness. You ask yourself what not responding immediately serves. It serves your body's need for work boundaries, your value of having existence outside your job, and your commitment to not letting work dominate every hour. Both options serve parts of your identity. Neither is automatically right. The question is, which parts of your identity are you reinforcing through your choice? If you respond immediately without this checking process, you're reinforcing that work takes precedence automatically. Your nervous system learns that professional demands override everything else, which means you're rebuilding the old identity structure where work was central. If you pause and decide consciously, you're reinforcing that work is just part of a larger identity that includes other legitimate needs. You might still respond immediately, but you're doing it from choice rather than compulsion. That difference matters structurally, even though the external behavior might look the same. Practice making evening choices that reflect your expanded identity. You finish work and have 3 free hours before bed. Your old programming wants to check work messages, do extra tasks, or engage in activities that serve professional development, because that's how you built your identity. Your expanded identity includes other dimensions that could legitimately claim those hours. Your body might want movement or rest. Your curiosity might pull you toward something you're interested in purely for its own sake. Your need for sensory satisfaction might want a meal you cook with attention. Your private values might want time spent doing something that serves no external purpose. The choice you make shows which identity structure you're operating from. If you automatically spend those hours on work-adjacent activities, you're contracting back toward work-defined identity. If you check your expanded identity map and choose something that serves a non-work dimension, you're reinforcing that other dimensions are real and structural. This doesn't mean you can never spend evening hours on work. It means you're making that choice consciously after checking what other parts of yourself need, rather than defaulting to work, because it's the only dimension you recognize as mattering. Weekend decisions reveal identity structure particularly clearly. You have Saturday morning free with no obligations. Your contracted identity fills this time with productivity, with tasks that prove you're using time well, with activities that serve advancement, even if they're not literally work. Your expanded identity has other options. Your body might want slow movement or extended rest. Your sensory preferences might want time in specific kinds of light or temperature. Your unmonetized curiosities might want exploration that goes nowhere productive. Your need for solitude might want hours without interaction or achievement. Check your expanded identity map before you fill the time. What dimension of yourself is asking for attention? What part of your identity has been neglected or compressed by work demands? What would serve your sense of being a complete person rather than just serving your professional development? You might still choose productivity, but you're choosing it from your expanded self rather than from compulsion. You might choose rest or curiosity or sensory satisfaction, and those choices reinforce that you're a person who exists across multiple dimensions. Larger decisions require more explicit checking against your expanded identity. You're offered a promotion that comes with increased responsibility and longer hours. Your old identity structure makes this an automatic yes, because advancement validates that you're becoming more valuable. Your expanded identity has competing considerations. The promotion serves your professional dimension, but what does it cost your other dimensions? Does it eliminate time you need for your body's energy patterns? Does it override values you've claimed as non-negotiable? Does it compress the space you need for activities that have nothing to do with achievement? Write out how the promotion affects each dimension of your identity. Don't skip this writing. Your mind will tell you that you can think through the trade-offs internally, but thinking doesn't produce the same clarity as writing. Put the decision on paper with sections for each dimension of your identity. Work dimension. The promotion provides challenge, recognition, increased responsibility that engages you. Body dimension. The longer hours will reduce sleep and eliminate movement time your body needs. Values dimension. Accepting this promotion means prioritizing career advancement over your stated value of maintaining space outside work. Curiosity dimension. The increased demands will eliminate time you spend on interests that aren't career-related. Look at what you've written. Every dimension has legitimate needs and concerns. Your job is to decide which dimensions matter most to you right now, not which dimensions should matter most or which dimensions make you look best. Your decision reveals your actual priorities regardless of your stated priorities. If you take the promotion despite significant costs to your non-work dimensions, you're revealing that work still dominates your identity structure. That might be the right choice for you right now. But make it consciously, knowing what you're choosing and what you're sacrificing. If you decline the promotion or negotiate different terms that protect your non-work dimensions, you're reinforcing that your identity includes more than professional advancement. This choice might cost you career velocity. That's the trade-off. You're choosing identity stability over maximum advancement. Your colleagues who've kept their identities merged with work will advance faster because they're willing to sacrifice everything else. You're operating from a different structure where work is important but not dominant. Daily schedule decisions show whether your expanded identity is operational or just aspirational. You need to leave work at a specific time to attend something that serves a non-work dimension of your identity. Your manager asks you to stay late to finish a project. Your old programming stays late automatically because work demands take precedence. Your expanded identity checks what leaving serves and what staying serves. Leaving serves your commitment to having identity dimensions beyond work. Staying serves your professional reliability and your fear of seeming uncommitted. Make the decision from your expanded self, rather than from compulsion. You might stay late because the project genuinely needs attention, and staying aligns with your value of following through on commitments. You might leave because protecting non-work dimensions is currently more important to your identity stability than any single project. Either choice is legitimate. The difference is whether you're choosing consciously from your complete identity or defaulting to work dominance, because that's your programming. Vacation decisions reveal identity structure dramatically. You're planning time off, and your nervous system wants to fill that time with activities that prove you're using vacation productively. Your old identity structure can't tolerate unstructured time, because time without achievement feels like waste. Your expanded identity has different criteria. What serves your body's need for restoration? What serves your sensory preferences for certain kinds of environments? What serves your curiosity about things that have nothing to do with your career? What serves your value of existing without proving anything? Plan vacation from your expanded self. This doesn't mean your vacation has to be completely inactive. It means you're checking what different dimensions of your identity need rather than automatically making vacation into achievement. Your body might need sleep and slow movement. Your sensory preferences might want specific kinds of beauty or comfort. Your curiosity might want exploration that goes nowhere measurable. Your need for solitude might want time completely away from social performance. Your value of rest without justification might want days with no agenda at all. If you return from vacation more exhausted than when you left, you probably planned from your contracted identity. You filled the time with activities you could document, places you could check off, experiences you could prove you had. Your vacation became another performance opportunity rather than restoration time. Your expanded identity plans vacation differently. It plans from what you actually need rather than what would make your vacation seem worthwhile to others. Response time decisions happen constantly and reveal your identity programming. Someone sends you a message. Your nervous system wants to respond immediately to prove you're available, engaged, on top of things. Your old identity structure equates fast responses with professional value. Your expanded identity has other considerations. Immediate response might interrupt something that serves a non-work dimension. Delayed response might serve your value of having boundaries around work intrusion. Thoughtful response might serve your value of saying what you actually think rather than what's fastest. Check your expanded identity before responding. What does immediate response serve? What does delayed response serve? What's actually required here versus what your programming insists is required? You might respond immediately because the situation genuinely needs quick input. You might delay because you're engaged in something that serves a different dimension of your identity, and switching costs you more than the delay costs the other person. You're operating from your expanded self when you make these choices consciously, rather than defaulting to immediate response every time. Morning routine decisions show which identity structure is running your day. You wake up and your first impulse is to check work messages. Your old programming starts each day by confirming your professional identity is still intact, that nothing catastrophic happened overnight, that you're still valuable and needed. Your expanded identity has other priorities for morning time. Your body might need slow transition from sleep to activity. Your sensory preferences might want specific kinds of light and temperature. Your value of starting the day from your complete self, rather than from work demands, might want morning time that belongs to you. Structure your morning to reflect your expanded identity. This might mean not checking work messages for the first hour. It might mean spending morning time on movement or food or quiet that serves your non-work dimensions. It might mean starting the day by reconnecting with your complete identity map, rather than immediately contracting into work mode. Your morning choices set the pattern for how your identity functions all day. Starting from your expanded self makes it easier to maintain that expansion. Starting from contracted work identity makes everything else feel like distraction from the real business of proving yourself professionally. Collaboration decisions reveal whether your expanded identity affects how you work with others. You're in a meeting that's running over its scheduled time. Your old programming stays in the meeting automatically because leaving seems uncommitted. Your expanded identity checks what staying serves and what leaving serves. Staying might serve the work genuinely, or it might serve your need to seem dedicated. Leaving might serve your body's schedule or your commitment to honoring time boundaries or your value of operating from your complete self. Make meeting decisions from your expanded identity. You might stay because the work legitimately needs your input, and staying aligns with your value of being reliable. You might leave because the meeting has become inefficient and staying serves nothing except the appearance of commitment. Your expanded identity gives you permission to make these choices based on what actually matters rather than just performing dedication. Your colleagues might interpret leaving as lack of commitment. That's information about how thoroughly professional environments expect identity merger. You're choosing to operate differently. Project selection decisions show whether your expanded identity influences what work you take on. You're offered a project that's professionally advantageous, but requires hours and intensity that would compress your non-work dimensions significantly. Your old identity structure accepts automatically because professional advancement takes precedence. Your expanded identity checks what accepting serves across all dimensions. The project serves your career, but costs your body's energy needs, your sensory requirements for restoration time, your curiosity about non-work subjects, and your value of maintaining identity space outside your job. Decide from your expanded self. You might accept the project because career advancement matters to you right now more than protecting non-work dimensions. That's legitimate if you're choosing it consciously, knowing the trade-offs. You might decline the project or negotiate different terms because maintaining your expanded identity matters more than any single professional opportunity. You're reinforcing through your choice that you're a person who exists across multiple dimensions, and work has to accommodate that fuller self rather than consuming it. Energy allocation decisions happen throughout each day. You have finite energy and multiple demands on that energy. Your old programming allocates energy to work first. Then whatever's left over goes to non-work dimensions. This allocation pattern means non-work dimensions only get energy if work leaves any remaining. which trains you back into work-dominated identity. Your expanded identity allocates energy differently. You check what dimensions need energy and distribute according to what serves your complete self, rather than automatically prioritizing work. Practice energy allocation from your expanded identity. Your body needs energy for movement and restoration. Your values need energy for choices that align with what matters to you privately. Your curiosities need energy for exploration that serves no professional purpose. Your sensory preferences need energy for creating environments and experiences you actually want. Your private thoughts need energy for internal processing that produces nothing measurable. Work needs energy for professional performance. All these dimensions need energy, and you're deciding consciously how to distribute rather than letting work consume everything automatically. Saying no becomes possible when you're operating from your expanded identity. Your contracted identity can't say no to work demands because work is how you prove your value. Declining anything professional feels like diminishing yourself. Your expanded identity can say no because you have other dimensions that need protection. Saying no to work sometimes serves your expanded self better than saying yes. This doesn't mean saying no constantly. It means checking what yes serves and what no serves across your complete identity, rather than automatically saying yes because work demands it. Practice saying no to requests that compress non-work dimensions beyond what those dimensions can sustain. Someone asks you to work late. Your body needs evening hours for restoration. Saying yes serves your professional image. Saying no serves your body's legitimate needs. Your expanded identity makes no a viable option rather than automatically defaulting to yes, because work requests always take precedence. You might say yes if the work genuinely requires it and your body can handle the compression. You might say no if protecting your body matters more than any single work request. Conversation decisions reveal which identity you're operating from. Someone asks what you did over the weekend. Your old programming describes activities in terms that prove you use time, well, that you remained productive, that you're still someone whose time produces value. Your expanded identity answers differently. You might describe rest without justifying it. You might mention activities that served curiosity or sensory preference or body needs without framing them as productive. You might acknowledge doing nothing without apologizing for it. Talk about your non-work dimensions as legitimate parts of your identity, rather than as support systems for your work. When you describe sleeping late, don't frame it as recovering so you can work better. Frame it as serving your body's needs because your body is part of your identity structure. When you describe engaging with curiosities, don't connect them to professional development. Describe them as serving your mind's need for exploration that has nothing to do with career advancement. Your language choices reinforce either contracted or expanded identity. Life disruption decisions show whether your expanded identity provides stability. Something interrupts your normal schedule: illness, family situation, unexpected demand. Your contracted identity falls apart because work was the organizing principle, and now work is temporarily impossible. Your expanded identity remains more stable because you have multiple dimensions. Work might be disrupted, but your body still exists. Your values still matter. Your sensory preferences still operate. Your curiosities still function. You're still yourself, even when you can't work, because work was never the entire structure. Respond to disruptions from your expanded self. When you're sick, your body's needs take precedence over work demands. Your contracted identity can't tolerate this because work always comes first. Your expanded identity recognizes that your body is part of your identity structure, and sometimes body needs override work needs. You're not failing at life when you prioritize your body. You're operating from an identity structure where multiple dimensions matter, and sometimes non-work dimensions legitimately take priority. Performance evaluation becomes different when you're operating from your expanded self. Your workplace evaluates your professional contribution. Your contracted identity experiences this evaluation as judgment of your entire worth. Your expanded identity experiences this as feedback about your work dimension, while recognizing that other dimensions exist independent of professional evaluation. Your manager's assessment matters for your career, but doesn't determine whether you're a valuable person, because your value exists across multiple dimensions, most of which your manager never sees. Receive performance feedback from your expanded self. Professional criticism stings because you care about doing good work, but it doesn't demolish you because work isn't your entire identity. Professional praise feels good because it recognizes your competence, but it doesn't become your only proof of worth because you have other sources of identity validation. Your expanded self provides stability that makes you less dependent on external evaluation while still caring genuinely about your professional performance. Long-term planning shifts when you're operating from your expanded identity. Your contracted identity planned purely for professional advancement, evaluating decisions based on where they led career-wise. Your expanded identity plans for a life that includes work, but isn't defined by work. You're thinking about how to maintain all dimensions of your identity over time, not just how to maximize career trajectory. Your planning includes questions about how work affects your body long-term, what values you want to protect across decades, what curiosities you want to keep alive, what kind of person you want to be beyond your job title. Make life plans from your expanded self. 5 years from now, what do you want to be true about your body, your values, your curiosities, your private integrity, your sensory life, your professional contribution? Your contracted identity only asks about career status. Your expanded identity asks about all dimensions. Your plans shift to accommodate the fuller structure. You're not just planning for professional success. You're planning for identity sustainability across multiple dimensions, which sometimes means career decisions that protect non-work dimensions, even at the cost of advancement speed. Your expanded identity becomes operational through consistent checking against your complete self, rather than defaulting to work dominance. Each decision is an opportunity to reinforce that you're a person who exists across multiple dimensions. Some decisions will favor work. Others will favor body, values, curiosity, sensory needs, private thoughts. What matters isn't perfect balance across decisions. What matters is that you're checking your complete identity, rather than contracting automatically into work-defined self. Your choices accumulate over time to either reinforce expanded identity or contract back toward work dominance. You're making those choices consciously now, which means your ambition can serve your life, rather than replacing it.